Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to give it a minute for people to hop in, but I'm Megan from Mount Calvary Cemetery. Nice to meet everybody on the training, and we'll get started in a few minutes. I want to be mindful of time, so I guess we'll get started. Um, So I think I realize I set this up as a webinar, so folks might have their cameras not on, so we might not be able to see your lovely faces, but thank you very much for joining us. As I said, I'm Megan Hayen. I am the Executive Director for the Mount Calvary Heritage Foundation. And so we are so grateful to all of you for volunteering your time for our Walls of Honor event that's going to be taking place October 2nd through the 6th here at our Pine Lawn Cemetery. We wanted to set up this volunteer training today so that way you would feel like you had some tools and were prepared if there was grief support or grief service needed for someone that's visiting the wall. So that was kind of our idea today. One quick order of business before we start that component of the training. So this is being recorded. So if you have to hop off at any point, there will be a recording sent out to everyone after. So don't feel too pressured to stay on, or if you're taking notes, you can always go back and review the video later on. We will also be sending a follow-up email this week that includes a volunteer handbook with more information about logistics for the event and frequently asked questions, things of that nature. So that'll be going out later this week, so everyone has access to that. And if you do have any questions as we lead up to the event, please feel free to contact me. I am more than happy to answer questions and help out however I can. But I want to turn it over now to Katie from TAPS. So they're the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And Katie's going to share just a little bit more about grief support and just how we can better assist folks as they're kind of going through that process while at this event.
Thank you, Megan. Hi, everybody. I will admit it seems it's throwing me off a little talking to a screen when there are no faces. But I'm so happy that you guys were able to join us. I want to share just a little bit more about TAPS and my role and why I am here to do this training for you guys, and then just kind of jump right into it because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time left over at the end where you guys can ask those heavy hitting questions that you have and do whatever I can to make you more comfortable in your role volunteering at this event. And just start off by saying thank you so much in whatever capacity it is that you are volunteering with this event. We rely heavily on volunteers at TAPS as well. And we just know that the work that we do could not be done without that amount of help. So I really appreciate you guys not only stepping up to do that, but also coming to this webinar or viewing it later, just so that you're not going in blind and that you're equipped to work with these survivors. So what is a survivor? At TAPS, we refer to all of our clients as survivors, our military families. So somebody who is, they're surviving and thriving through a loss. And my role at TAPS is the peer mentor training manager. So with our survivors, once they are 18 months out or more from their loss and they feel that they are in a part of their grief journey where they're able to volunteer and give back, we teach a quite lengthy training to them. And then we have them come alongside newer survivors and we pair them up in one-to-one matches or helping facilitate local care groups in their area where they're leaning on their lived experience to connect with those who are going through grief, and again, just walk alongside them in that. I have taken our training and really condensed it down as much as I possibly could without losing too much of its essence, to try and give you guys like a mentoring grief work 101 kind of class for you guys. So without further ado, I will get into that for you guys. And we are a Zoom and a Google Meet this organization. So please give me some grace while I work my way through Microsoft Teams.
Miss Katie does that. If anyone has any questions, there are two boxes up towards the top, both a chat or Q&A feature. So if you have questions as she's going through a presentation, feel free to ask those in those chat boxes.
Yes, and on that note, please, Megan, feel free to cut me off, interrupt me as those questions come through. I'm more than happy to answer them in real time rather than just waiting till the very end. All right. So I believe I've done this right, and you guys should be able to see my slideshow presentation.
Confirm that we can see your slideshow presentation.
Thank you so much. All right, so like I said, we titled this Walking Beside the Bereaved. It's a volunteer training. It's a very, very condensed version of our grief-informed peer mentor training. So you will see I didn't adjust the slides too much. Sometimes I will refer to like what to do as a peer mentor or peer supporter. I understand that some of you are coming into this capacity, maybe not sharing the experience of a military loss. So it's maybe not that necessarily peer-to-peer support, and that you can't as closely relate as some of our, our survivors who we're training are able to, but the concepts are still the same. What I'm also going to do following up this training is I'm going to send a copy of the slides to Megan so she can share them with you. And we have, it's a little under 100 pages. I think it's actually way shorter than that. But we do have a manual. Oh yeah, just under 100. That we provide to our peer mentors. And I'm going to send a digital copy of this so that it probably has way more information than you could ever want, but that way in your own individual time, there's some reflective activities and things in there. So as you're getting ready to approach this event, you can go through that in your own time, do some reflective activities and some self-study if you want a little bit more information. Something that our peer mentor program has been grounded in since it first began. Also a little bit more about TAPS. We've been around for 30 years. Our peer mentor program has really been going strong for about 25 years. But something that we're grounded in is Dr. Alan Wolfelt's companioning philosophy. So there's 11 tenets. I want to share some of my favorites with you, and then talk a little bit more about that. So companioning is about bearing witness to the struggles of others. It's not about judging or directing these struggles. Companioning means discovering the gifts of sacred silence. It does not mean filling up every moment with words. Companioning is about learning from others. It is not about teaching them. Companioning is about curiosity. It is not about expertise. Companioning is about going to the wilderness of the soul with another human being. It is not about thinking you are responsible for finding the way out. And my favorite, companioning is about respecting disorder and confusion. It is not about imposing order and logic. I came to TAPS in 2018. My loss was in 2014. My significant other died by suicide. My life could not have been thrown into like a bigger storm. The whirlwind of emotions and craziness. And while I appreciated that everybody wanted to help and wanted to go through this checklist of the things that we needed to do, I needed to embrace the crazy and people to understand and give me grace. And I also needed to give myself grace and know that it was okay for life to just feel, a little reckless and hopeless, because it was at the time. And that's what I needed to push through. I didn't need somebody saying, well, these, let's step A and step B to healing is going to look like this. Like I said, there are 11 tenets in the companioning philosophy. They acknowledge that grief is a natural response. It's not a problem. It's not a disorder. This is something that we go through. We grieve because we loved so strongly. The companioning philosophy says, we're going to give some sacred space. I can't solve your grief. There is no solving our grief. We have to work through it. Think of grief as a tunnel that you have to go through. You can't go over it. You'll never get over it, but you can work your way through it. And so with the companioning philosophy, we walk alongside people in grief. We don't push them in one direction or drag them down this path because this is what worked for us, or this is what I read in a book, or I saw Dr. Phil say on TV. We walk alongside them. And as we're walking alongside them, sometimes we might go, that choice doesn't feel like the best choice, but that's an inside thought. And we're going to stand with them as they go through that, so long as they're not harming themselves or others. And then if that decision they've made, kind of backfires or it doesn't work out for them, that's okay. I'm here to, shine a light, be your lighthouse in the dark, pick you up. Let's, backtrack down that path and let's try another one. So again, we're not here to take away that pain. We're here to honor that pain because you loved somebody so much that it hurts so deeply. So we're just here to lean in with you. Things that are important about being a peer versus being a counselor. I don't know who's on this call today. Some of you may wear, may be a mental health professional, might wear a social worker hat, a therapist hat, a nurse, a doctor, whatever, those helping roles are. But in this role, that's not what we're here to be. We're just here to, again, walk alongside somebody in their grief. So in that peer role, we're there to just support their choice, share hope, and facilitate change. And again, we do that through just sometimes it's baby steps, sometimes it's minute by minute. And obviously, like with our peer mentors, they're linked to somebody one-on-one and they're sharing a relationship with them for, upwards of a year, where these are just going to be short moments that you guys have talking with them. So I'll get into how we can have those conversations, but I still think it's important to understand that when having those conversations, we're really focusing on, what's strong and letting them share their story, and focusing on them. And again, grief is not a problem. It's not a disorder. It's not something to be fixed. It's something to go through and to grow through. In the book that I send you, there is on page 18, 19, there's a list of peer support qualities. So these are things that will also be beneficial for you to evaluate as you're stepping into this role as a volunteer. The ability to be present, open-minded, objective, sensitive, committed to wellness and self-care, being self-aware, and then treating people ethically. So when you have some time on your own, there is, like I said, in the book, and then I'll send you these slides. Not only is there a list of peer support qualities that you should look for within yourself, but there's also an assessment so you can go through and kind of rate yourself and take some notes on how well are you with these qualities. It is not to judge you. You're the only one that has to see this. Although I have suggested to people in the past that, if you're unsure, then go through and rate yourself and then ask a family member or a really close friend to rate you. And you might be surprised to see that, oh, I thought that I was really present, but they only rated me a 2 because I'm on my phone the whole time I'm talking to them and they don't actually feel like I'm present in our conversations. So it's kind of, it can be a little scary, but it's also kind of nice to get that outside perspective to know, like, how well am I really doing with these things. So, but what we are looking for in those conversation, again, is just to be present. That can be especially difficult when people are sharing their tough stories. Our minds can kind of wander because we're uncomfortable. It's not about our level of comfort. It's about giving them that space to share that. Again, being open-minded to people's differences, and then non-judgmental in your interactions. it might not be the way that you would have handled a situation, but we're not there to talk about how we would have done something. We're there to listen to how they went through it and what the outcome of that was. In that, when we're not giving advice, but you can offer up opportunities. There are resources that are available to help. If you can think of things like, art therapy and seeking counseling and things like of that nature, it's okay, journaling, and it's okay to offer those. It's just that we're not saying you should journal. Journaling will help you. It's offering an array of things and saying these are things that you might consider that could potentially help you. Making sure that we are sensitive to their experience is kind of the big thing, right? Even if you are somebody who has experienced a close loss yourself, even if you can very closely relate to somebody, we all grieve differently. Our stories all look different. So you can never truly understand what somebody else is going through. So we want to make sure that we're respecting their individualized experience that they have with grief and loss. Be self-aware. We're going to talk a little bit later about how you can reflect on your own experiences and your own biases to make sure that those aren't negatively impacting these conversations that you're having. And then, of course, these are things that I'll repeat throughout this training you'll find, but being ethical. The biggest thing is that these are their stories, and we want to make sure that we're respecting that. So what people share with you stays with you, unless, again, there is concern for their well-being or the well-being of others, at which point, and I think I would lean on Megan for this. We obviously have our policies as to like how we ask our peer mentors to report this information to us. But Megan, I would assume that you guys have somewhere where they would report directly to you, or yes, no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we will have an information table at the event that will have a Mount Cavalier staff member in it throughout the event. So if someone is expressing something of concern, you can come up to our table and, we will find the right resource to address that.
Perfect. Thank you. Something just to point out again, the reason that we utilize peer mentors, aside from the fact that there just currently is a lack of available mental health care, is that we know that we're stronger together. In the words of Helen Keller, although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. And we do that best when we can lean on one another. We're going to talk about empathetic listening and active listening. So this is where we're really getting more into those skills. I am actually going to let Brene Brown talk to you guys about empathetic listening because she does it better than I ever could. And I'm okay with admitting that and owning that.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So if you take one thing away from that video, it is that you don't have to have the right thing to say. You don't have to have anything to say at all. The best thing that you can do is bite your tongue, sit with them in the moment, give them that space to feel, and just be there to feel alongside them. You can lean into those questions if it starts to get a little bit awkward. If you're potentially the one that feels like it's awkward, try to ride out some of that awkwardness, but you get kind of that vibe and that feeling that maybe we both feel awkward, or you think that they are wanting a little bit more conversation in that, at which point we'll talk about like some questions that you can ask, and we'll roll into that more of that active listening and how are you having conversation and what kinds of things are you asking of them. But keep in mind in doing that we're being intentional with our open-ended questions. We're not asking questions to be nosy because I want to know the details of your loss. Although for some people it is healing for them to share the details of their loss. But we're not asking because we're nosy and we want to know those things. We're asking the questions that will help them in that moment to grieve and to be able to share their story and find the best way to share it. Helping them to identify emotions, very different from labeling somebody's emotions. We don't want to tell somebody that they're angry or they're sad. Most people aren't going to get upset if you're like, you look happy. Although if they look happy and they're not, that could be, upsetting. Well, actually, I'm not happy. I'm quite pissed off right now, or I'm very sad. I'm just really good at faking it, So we never want to label somebody's emotions for them, but we do want to listen to their stories and what their body language and the tone of their voice looks like while they're sharing those stories, and maybe help them to identify some of those emotions by pointing out, oh, I noticed that your voice was a little shaky while you shared that, or I noticed, your voice lowered or you slowed down, something that kind of helps them to come to that. I don't know how many of you guys have, if you've ever worked with kids, or if you've ever been, maybe you have kids, or if you've ever been in a school, but they have these signs, especially for those, kind of preschool and under, where they're little smiley faces. I think in doctor's offices, sometimes they have them as well, but they label like, this is what angry looks like, and this is what happy looks like, and sad, etc. And so I always think of those when I'm talking about helping them identify their emotions. And I think about younger kids who have all of these big feelings, but they don't know how to label or identify those feelings. And that's why it comes out, sometimes as throwing a tantrum in the middle of Walmart, because they don't understand those things. And when we're in crisis and when we're grieving really heavily, sometimes it's just hard to know what those feelings are because there's so many of them and they're coming at us so rapidly and so strongly. So sometimes it's just helpful to have that conversation to maybe identify and put some words to those emotions. And then summarizing is really, in this instance, it's just confirming that you know what they're saying, that I have an understanding of what you're trying to tell me. And also, and again, I'll lean to Megan for this. I'm not 100% on what all of your roles are, but summarizing does help with the opportunity to break away from that conversation at the appropriate given time. If that is, this has gone beyond my scope, so you need to lean into some other support, then you can utilize summarization to, kind of hey, so this is what I understand from your conversation so far. Maybe you're looking for some additional help. Walk them over to one of the resource tables where you can kind of get that additional help and pass that story along. When you're in these one-on-one, like our mentoring, we tell people, there's always more to that conversation. You yourself can't be overutilized. You can't be on the phone with somebody for 2, 3 hours at a time. So we use summarizing to say, you have to get back to your job. You have to get back to your life as well, or you have to go check on the next person. So it's okay to kind of wrap that conversation up in, half hour, an hour, whatever time you've allotted for that conversation. But this, I'll let Megan I saw you come on camera, so I'm hoping you have something to say to that, as far as these conversations are going to look a little different, and I'm not sure what that looks like for you guys.
So I know everyone's volunteer roles are different for this event. And some of you, again, signed up to be greeters. Some of you signed up to do the name lookups on the wall, things of that nature, just general information. So your role may look different depending on where you are at the event. But there are going to be resource groups available. We have them tabling in what we're calling our Veterans Village throughout the day. But there also will be some counselors and then some of the peer-to-peer mentors there as well. So there are opportunities if someone is struggling or needs additional conversation to find a more quiet, reflective space to have that conversation. So you'll get a map after this. Our chapel building is going to be where there is that quiet, reflective space. So there will be counselors in that space. They'll just be coloring books if someone just needs to take a minute and sit. Lots of tissues if they need those as well. But again, if you're in a conversation with someone and you're feeling like, I don't know if I can provide anything else right now, or I'm not really sure what to do next. Again, recommending they maybe link up with someone else at that point would probably be the best idea there.
Perfect. Thank you. So if you are in a conversation with somebody, again, leaning on those empathetic listening skills, but also the active listening skills. And this is just to say whether it is a 5-minute conversation or a 5-hour conversation. And from a counselor standpoint, I do hope that nobody finds themselves in a 5-hour long conversation, because at that point, we really need to be passing them on to a stronger resource. But the 3 biggest things when we talk about active listening is that we are listening more than we speak, because again, this is their time to share their story and get that out. So we lean on like an 80-20 rule, where you should only be speaking 20% of the time. You have 2 ears, 1 mouth. So if it helps to think of it that way, you listen more than you're speaking. Make sure that you're attending to listening. That can be especially hard when you are at an event and you maybe have other duties that you're supposed to be doing. But when you are having that conversation, when somebody's talking to you, try your hardest to be fully involved in that conversation with them until you're able to, or the appropriate time to pass it over to somebody else. And again, make sure that you're paying attention for content, feelings, and meaning. We're not just listening to the words that somebody is saying, because somebody can be telling you about a wonderful time that they had at the zoo while they're bawling their eyes out. So obviously there's a little bit more to the story than that. So we want to help, open that door for them and have some conversation around that. We utilize a communication pyramid. So it kind of just runs through active listening. The bottom of the pyramid is that listening. Those are your primarily nonverbal skills. So building trust and rapport, being present and wanting to genuinely, be somebody that they can talk to, just being authentically you helps to build that trust and that rapport. You, as volunteers for this event, you kind of are already going to have this beacon of like, I can trust that person. I can lean in on that person. Silence, again, very key. It's sometimes it can feel awkward, but that's an us problem, because we're so used to, as humans, wanting to fix problems and I'm going to checklist and I'm going to make you all better. And we can't, again, that's just not something that we can do with grief. And so sometimes it is just sitting with somebody in their silence and just being a presence for them. We just talked about attending, and that's just making sure that you're undistracted. Smartwatches are the bane of my existence and my job. I don't think people realize, we've gotten a little better about not being on our phones constantly. Like if I'm talking to you, I'm going to have my phone in my back pocket, or but people don't seem to notice. It's just this like knee-jerk reaction when their smartwatch and their wrist buzzes, they just look down and they start clicking on their little baby screens, and it just drives me bonkers. Because their attention is immediately drawn, and I don't care how great you are not multitasking. Your brain is now reading that text message, and everything else has kind of gone out the window. So if you absolutely don't need your smartwatch, maybe don't wear it that day. But that's a big pet peeve for me. So empathy, we just heard Brene Brown talk about that difference between empathy and sympathy, and why empathy is so important in these situations. And then when you get into the feedback, this is that 20% of the 80-20 rule. When you are having conversations, being able to reflect on the things they've said, ask the appropriate questions, and kind of help summarize and gather up some of that main point. Sometimes I like to use the term word vomit, but when, somebody's anxious or they're going through a lot, they unload a lot on you. And so you're kind of there to be that sounding board, but also help them go, okay, these are the main points of what you said. I squirrel brain anyway. In my grief, I don't think anybody could keep up with my conversations. So it's nice to have somebody who can go, there was a lot that was said there. What I gathered from that was that it's been real challenging since your son died. You've been going through ABC. Some gentle openers or things mid conversations that you can say with people. If you do see somebody crying and maybe you sit down next to them for a little bit and you want to give them that space to talk. A reminder before we go through these again, these are invitations. This is not a checklist. Please feel free to say these in a way that feels natural to you. Do not come out like a scripted robot. And how does that make you feel? But some of those phrases are, tell me, how are you feeling today? I would love for you to share about, fill in the blank with me. I would love for you to share about, your father, your son, your mother, whomever it is that their person that they lost. Ask them to share that, like, what were they like? We sometimes get so focused on the death story and the loss that we forget how important that life story was. And it's nice sometimes for somebody to just say, hey, share a happy memory with me. Share something that you loved about them or something that they loved about life. Ask them about some of the helpful ways that they've been coping with their loss. And just letting them know that, like, again, grief is hard. Our peer mentors are typically working with people who are newer in their grief. Some of the attendees of this event may be a little further out from their grief, but grief stays with us our whole lives. It's not something that ever goes away. We have good days, we have bad days. We hope for, the majority of to be good days as we get farther along in our grief, but that doesn't mean that it's Tuesday at 3:00. Grief doesn't hit me out of the blue, or when I'm at an event like this specifically, it really starts the emotions stirring in me. And so making sure that, you're just asking them like simple check-ins. How are you taking care of yourself? What are you doing? And sometimes taking care of ourselves doesn't have to be the big self-care activities like, oh, I'm painting and I'm running marathons and I journal. Sometimes in grief, taking care of ourselves means, are you drinking enough water during the day? How many times did you brush your teeth today? How many days have you been wearing those same leggings? Maybe we put on a fresh pair, brush our hair. The simple things that are making sure, our day-to-day self-care. And again, using clarifying questions like, did I hear you say, or help me understand what you mean when you say, just to make sure that you're picking up on what it is that they're trying to share with you. Another tool that works really well for getting people to open up is to just parrot things back to them. It's incredible. Somebody will be telling you, like, I've just been having a really hard time and I don't know what I'm doing right now, or I really miss them. And if you just say, sounds like you're having a hard time with this loss, and maybe you're feeling a little lost yourself. You literally just said back to them what they said to you, but you have opened this door for them to go, yeah. And then they just unload some more. So it gives them permission to speak sometimes. It lets them know that you're there and you genuinely want to listen to what they have to say. Some words of caution. We've all heard these. Even me, having dealt with loss, has accidentally let one of these slip now and again, or said something that we mean well, But those of us who have lost somebody close, one of the things that we kind of laugh about regularly is that like we could write a book of like the absolutely ridiculous things that people have said to us, the hurtful things that people have said to us. And then one of those chapters would be they meant well when they said this, but it wasn't the thing to say. So try to avoid saying things the at least, like at least you had time to say goodbye. I even hear within the TAPS community, we have, people with illness loss, sudden illness loss, and non-sudden, and even sometimes they'll say, well, at least you knew that, that was coming and you had a year with them, or you had a couple months, it didn't happen instantaneously. So we never want to compare grief, and we don't, back to Brene Brown, we don't want to like silver line a situation with they're in a better place, time heals all wounds. I would hope that you guys are wise enough to know that telling somebody to move on or be strong is inappropriate, but we hear it from family and friends and people in our community all the time. I'm 10 years out from my loss, and sometimes I'll share things on social media on his birthday or on our anniversary or the anniversary of his death, and occasionally I will get somebody who's like, oh, are you like, it's been 10 years. And I'm like, it sure has. It will be the rest of my life. Thank you for sharing this as my TED Talk. But so, just keeping an eye on these sorts of things that, again, sometimes we say them and we mean well. I know exactly how you feel, or I understand. Again, we can never truly understand what somebody else is going through. I can relate, and you can say, if you've been in a similar experience, it's okay to relate to that and to tell them that you can relate. Just make sure that when you do that, you're not, stealing their thunder, so to say, that you're letting them know that, hey, I can relate to this. I've been through something similar, but this is still their time to share their story. When all else fails, think of the word wait. Why am I talking? Again, am I asking questions because I'm nosy and I just want to know all these details about their loss? Or am I asking questions because I think it will help them on their healing journey? Am I talking because I want to have the answers and I have a need to be heard? Or are the things that I'm sharing going to be useful to them? Also, take a step back and think about how do you connect with others? How do you know when you're connecting? And then how to use that connection and ongoing support. And then sometimes we're not connecting. You are not necessarily going to connect with everybody you talk to. That is not a reflection of you and your skills as a person or who you are, and your heart might be in it. We just aren't meant to share personality traits with everybody. We're not meant to have conversations. And I'm sure you've all been in those conversations where you at the grocery store and you're joking with the cashier, and it just feels so natural to have conversation. You feel like, oh, we could go grab dinner, we could talk for hours. And then sometimes you're talking to somebody and you're like, this is just an awkward conversation, and there's a vibe that you can't quite get past and you don't know what that is. It's nothing, again, against you or that person. That connection's not there, and that's okay. And that's when pass them along to somebody who will be able to help. Because fighting that and wanting to be the person that's helpful to them, or wanting to be the person they connect with, is going to do more harm than good. I also want to take some time to review some listening blocks with you guys. So again, we are all guilty of at least one, if not all of these, at some point in a conversation that we have had with somebody. Some of these are ones where we can go, oh, that one I am guilty of all the time, a lot of the time. So rehearsing, that's planning your reply instead of saying present. This is probably what I am the worst at. I've gotten significantly better over the years, but I had a lot of anxiety growing up. And so I wanted to make sure that I was saying the right thing so that I wasn't judged for what I was saying, or I wanted to have the right answer. So when somebody was talking to me, I'm sitting there like, oh, I'm going to say this. And then I'm so busy rehearsing it so I don't stumble on my words that I'm no longer actually listening to the rest of their conversation. Advising, we talked about this already, but making sure that we're not offering solutions. Sometimes people they just need space to talk. Don't minimize their pain. Don't dismiss it. We're not comparing. Grief is never a place where I want my fish to be bigger than your fish. Everybody's grief looks different, and we all experience the trauma of our grief differently. So there is no, my grief was harder, my loss was more. regardless of relationship type, cause of death, when it happened, how long you knew the person, all of those things, it doesn't make anybody's grief more important than somebody else's. Um, we're not judging them. Don't derail the conversation. I know that sometimes grief can be an extremely heavy topic and it can get uncomfortable. That's when, if you are getting to that point as volunteers, like Megan said, there's a table, like there is a room of counselors. Walk and talk on the way to that space for them. Placating, letting them know that it'll be okay. It gets better with time, those sorts of things. Truth be told, having gone through, really close grief myself, I know that time has made it better, but telling me it'll get better with time, it'll be okay, were definitely words that would not have been helpful early in my grief. Identifying, so this is, again, stick with their story. You can share small parts of your story here and there. That's going to help with the connection, but we really want to stick with their story. Distraction, we talked about the checking the phone and things like that. And mind reading. Sometimes we want to get through a conversation so fast that we're like trying to finish sentences for them, or we're trying to just get to the end of their story and then this is what happened. Don't let them share their story at the pace that they need to share it. I was going to do a listening blocks activity with you guys and have you guys share what some of your listening blocks might be. Obviously in a webinar form, something that we're not going to be able to accomplish, but start to think of those, maybe write them down, and then some things to keep in mind for listening blocks. I'm not asking you to fix these overnight, and I'm not saying that they'll ever just go away. You're setting yourself up for unrealistic expectation. If you're like, my listening block is rehearsing, and I'm just not going to do that anymore. The best thing you can do is prepare by knowing what your blocks are. So before you go to this event, sit down and really think through these and be honest with yourself about what they are. That way, going into that event, oh, I'm rehearsing again. I got to stop doing that while you're having a conversation with them. Some things that we've already said will also help with those listening blocks. You're there just to listen. You don't need to speak. So you don't have to jump ahead and read their mind and finish their sentence. You don't have to advise and have an answer for their problems. You're a peer. You're not a fixer. You're not a counselor. Make sure you're paying attention, asking those thoughtful questions that we talked about. Paraphrasing, you can use gentle interruptions. Sometimes people will just talk. And it's okay to say, oh, hey, sorry to interrupt, but before you move on, I did want to mention, you said something and it made me think we have a resource table for that. Or are you familiar? Most of them will, they'll be military loss survivors. So if it's, oh, are you familiar with TAPS? And that way you can get that out. That way you're not rehearsing and thinking about those things. You can go ahead and get them off, out of your brain and into the conversation so that you can move forward with actually listening. But ultimately just be yourself and be sincere in those conversations. All right. I'm going to talk about storytelling with you guys here in a moment, but basically the skill building that we've gone through is storytelling. So just knowing when and what to share and why am I sharing this information with somebody? Why am I sharing these parts of my story? And then active listening, those open-ended questions, make sure that you're, 80-20 rule, reflecting, restating, summarizing, empathy, stay away from the silver lining. Just sometimes it's just silence, just being there in the moment. And then authenticity. I would hope that the reason you guys signed up and volunteered to do this is because you genuinely care, that your heart is in it. So you've already got authenticity down. Trust yourselves in these conversations. Trust yourselves when you're there to support somebody. Typically we go through how to prepare to listen because again, for our mentors, they know that they're going to we've got a phone call scheduled for Monday evening, or I'm meeting up with my mentee for coffee at this time. So this is kind of how they can prepare. It's a little different when it's like an in the moment, but still important to note that connecting with somebody does require that you're present. You do need to be mindful and open to listening. And then the best way to prepare yourself. So, if you're running from one end of, the event to the other, is to be able to just take a pause, and somebody interrupts you, just be able to pause, take a breath real quick, do a quick 5-second centering. That way you're in the moment, in the conversation with them. Make sure that while you're at the event, you guys are practicing some small self-care. So make sure that, you are drinking water, staying hydrated, utilizing the restroom. I think Megan said something about snackies and coffee. So make sure that you're doing all those things and you're meeting your basic needs, so that when you're having a conversation with somebody, you're not like doing the potty dance and having to, worry about stuff like that. Obviously you're not going to have past notes or promises that you made to them, but make sure that you're clarifying your intentions. So being present again in that conversation, and just, I think this is now like the 10th time. So if somebody's making tally marks, you can let me know at the end of this, but let go of the need to fix, let go of the need to provide advice to them. Key things to remember: confidentiality, right? What is shared stays sacred. We're always resiliency focused. So we're trying to look for some strengths. Even when it feels like the world is against you, sometimes it takes somebody from an outside perspective to say, hey, yeah, grief is hard. The things you're going through are difficult, but you showed up today. You came to this event. You got out of the house. Looks like you brushed your hair. Sometimes just pointing out the little things to somebody, even if it's just a lighthearted giggle, but it's still just pointing out, like, you did this for you. You showed up for you. Peer support, having these conversations, it's a skill, but it's also something that we have innately. Like, so don't overthink it, but practice is key. So, practice having some conversations with family and friends over the next few weeks as we're getting ready to go into this. I'm also going to send some kind of the big R word when you come to things like this, role play. I'm not going to make you guys do any role play, but I'm going to send some scenarios that Megan can share with you guys, just so you can read through some like conversations and maybe get an idea of what it might look like if those conversations were to come up when you're at this event. We do want to stay alert to signs of distress. This is, when it is beyond your scope, beyond your skill, and you think that somebody is overly emotional or showing signs of crisis, knowing who to report to. And again, I will lean to Megan for that, but if it's just going to that table, but making sure that those people, we're not just saying, oh, this is uncomfortable for me and walking away from that, but we're making sure that those folks get the help that they need, that additional help. Withhold judgment. And then you might not be the person following up. So again, that's making sure that we're passing them along to the right people who will be able to follow up. Again, our peer mentors do have to maintain some follow-up with their mentees. This video, I kept it in here because who doesn't love Rocky Balboa? I kept it in here because we teach, one of our modules is about resiliency, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how resiliency can play into these conversations that you guys are having, but primarily because I want you guys to focus on your own resiliency as well. So, but in this video, he's talking to his son. And basically, when we're grieving and we're teaching our peer mentors this, there is that healthy grief journey, and there's that meaning making part of our grief that says, okay, I went through my grief and now what do I do? And sometimes it does feel like the world is out to get us, and it feels like somebody's just, again, he's going to say it a little better, but beating us down. And at some point, as hard as that grief is, we have to make a decision. I can sit and I can wallow in my grief, and I am not denying that it is difficult to go through this, and take your time, give yourself grace while you go through it and allow yourself to wallow. But at some point you have to make a decision to, am I going to grieve and am I going to let this take over my life? Or does my person want me to thrive and to grow, and where do I go next? So once again, just like with Brene Brown, Sylvester does a much better job of this than I, so I'll let you guys watch this clip real quick.
You ain't gonna believe this, but you used to fit right here. I'd hold you up and say to your mother, this kid's gonna be the best kid in the world. This kid's gonna be somebody better than anybody ever knew. And you grew up good and wonderful, It was great just watching you every day. It was like a privilege. Then the time come for you to be your own man and take on the world, and you did. But somewhere along the line, you changed. You stopped being you. You let people stick a finger in your face and tell you you're no good. And when things got hard, you started looking for something to blame, like a big shadow. Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you wanna be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. I'm always gonna love you no matter what. No matter what happens. You're my son, you're my blood. You're the best thing in my life. But until you start believing in yourself, you ain't gonna have a life. Don't forget to visit your mother.
So again, he's really referring to just using the excuses of life hits hard. And admittedly, I do not want to invalidate anybody's loss because it is one of the hardest hits that I think to this day that I've ever taken. But at some point, I had to get out of bed, even if the first couple weeks getting out of bed meant just walking down the stairs and moving from the bed to the couch to watch TV. I still got out of bed. But I had to eventually say, okay, but I have to do something and I have to be somebody. Whatever that somebody is, whoever that is, it cannot be somebody who's closed myself in and let my grief take over my life, because I wouldn't want that for myself. Christian wouldn't want that for me. And so using that resilience, don't tell somebody that, so and so wouldn't want this for you, but just using that understanding that like life throws things at us, really hard things at us. But in grief, in trauma, there is also post-traumatic growth, and we do that through resiliency. These are just some things for you guys to keep in mind. Check in with yourself and your own resilience skills, because, oh, by the way, you're going to be hearing some stories that are going to take kind of, an emotional, compassionate toll on you. And so how do you hear those stories, but then also self-care and take care of yourself and not let those weigh on you so much that they're keeping you up at night or that you can't come back from that. So just having some self-awareness, make sure that you keep paying attention to your own thoughts and emotions, behaviors, and then some regulation. How do I regulate? No. But like, how do I react in those situations? Because I am an adult. I know that even though I am upset and angry, I can't throw myself out on the ground like a toddler. Although I give it like a year window for grief. I tell people to really push their limits. And if you want to throw a tantrum in Walmart, you should try it out. And when people look at you silly, you can definitely go, I'm a widow, and enough said. So, but we also know that ultimately that can't be what we do, right? We can't self-regulate that way. So how do you handle those situations? What is your outward opinion? Opinion is not the word I wanted. Sorry, my brain has lost words. But so that you get what you want out of that. What are your strengths of character? What do you value? And if you value something, you have to uphold that. So if integrity is something I value, if honesty and truth are something I value, then I can't walk around lying to people. I can't expect the truth from somebody else if I'm going to lie. I cannot expect people to keep my story sacred if I'm walking around gossiping and sharing everybody's business. Connection. That's the biggest thing that you guys are bringing to the table for this right now, for their resiliency, for your own resiliency. Make sure that you're leaning on one another. Make sure you're leaning on Megan. We're going to have some TAPS peer mentors at this event, hopefully. and you can lean on them. So maybe you don't have your own personal grief, but hearing everybody else's grief stories again can be tricky. So make sure that you're leaning on one another to say, hey, this, hit me a little heart close to home, or I might need to talk to somebody myself. Mental agility, again, that's kind of pulling into that judgment, right? There's more than one way to do something. It might not be the way that I would have considered it, but at least I can look at it from a different perspective. Or if something isn't working, what other ways can we go about that? And then optimism. I'm not asking you to be a glass is half full kind of person. Sometimes the glass is a quarter of the way full. Sometimes there's a drop of water in it, but hey, there's a drop of water in it. So how can you maintain some positivity and focus? I am going to ask you guys to do this for yourselves. It says share your story. When I say share, I mean put it on paper, share it with yourself. But whether it's just on a piece of notebook paper or when I send out the manual, used to be a page number on the bottom of this slide. I think when I cleaned it up, I got rid of it. But there is a section in the manual that has some good writing space and a little bit more information about how you can write out your story. If you have your own grief story, or if you've done work with grief before, whether it's somebody very close to you or a grandparent or, whatever, everybody has lost somebody. Could be your dog, like your goldfish. So, but write down that story, beginning to end, not just the loss, but the feelings that came after that. And the why you wanted to volunteer for this event. Why did you want to come to this event? And take that long story. This is your turn to, tell your long story, and then pull out some important parts from that. The day that your world changed. When was the turning point in your loss where you started leaning more into like the hope and the healing and the meaning making part of your journey? And why did you choose not necessarily to mentor, but to come to this event as a volunteer? Also look at what was a challenge that you had in your loss, what was a strength that you had in your loss, and a resiliency word. These are the parts of your story that you can then share when you are in those deeper conversations with somebody to help build that trust, rapport, relatability. Also, it helps you identify what parts of your own story are very vulnerable that you want to keep to yourselves, because just because you are doing this kind of work does not mean that you have to open up about everything. It doesn't mean that you have to, to be that open book. There are parts of my story in the work that I do that nobody knows. There are parts of my story that my sister is, my best friend, my confidant, does not know. It's for me, it's for my journal, it's for my grief counselor. There are parts of my story that I don't know that I'll ever be comfortable sharing with anybody outside of that circle. So that's okay. But you need to recognize what those parts are so that you don't accidentally feel like you have this need to share, and then you share those and then you feel like, oh, I've overshared. I've shared too much and now I've created an uncomfortable situation, or I've put a story out there that I can't get back. The other thing that I want you guys to take a moment to do is to write a letter of gratitude. I really encourage you to then deliver that letter. Either put it in the mail or hand deliver it to somebody. But think of, if you have had extreme loss, if there was somebody who really helped you through that, write them a letter of gratitude. Maybe it's not loss. In your case, maybe it's just that you've gone through some difficult times and there was somebody there that you could lean on that was really there for you. Write them a letter of gratitude. Really open up and reflect on how they were able to help you and why it was so impactful to you. Let them know that. This is a few things. One, it really just helps you remember like why you want to do this for somebody else, right? More often than not, we help because either somebody helped us and we now want to pay it forward, or because maybe we didn't have somebody there when we needed somebody. So we want to be that pillar of strength for somebody else so that they're not feeling that void as well. But it will make you feel better to thank somebody. And we're so often we're like, oh, they know that they were important to me, they know that I love them. Tell them. So again, highly encourage you to write your story, highly encourage you to write out that letter of gratitude. In the manual that I'm going to send, and maybe I'll send these separate too. I'm not going to go through these like super detailed, but there is our code of ethics that we give. And so just food for thought is that we're honoring individual journeys. So again, not everybody's journey is going to look the same. They're more detailed in here. But lean on those companioning tenets. All 11 of them will be in the book. And just remembering that we're not leading or pushing or pulling down certain paths. We're there just to walk alongside. Share with sensitivity. Again, you're allowed to share your own experiences of loss, but remember who we're there to support, that this isn't our time, it's their time. And then make sure that that support is non-judgmental. We do embrace diversity, inclusivity. With my peer mentors, I'm able to tell them to reflect on their biases, let us know what those are, so that if you absolutely do not like people whose favorite color is purple, I don't partner you with somebody whose favorite color is purple, because that relationship isn't going to be beneficial to anybody. Obviously, in a situation like this, you can't do that. But if you are talking to somebody and you can recognize that you maybe aren't going to be a best fit to have that conversation because something about them, just stirs you the wrong way, make sure that you're passing them off gently to somebody who will be helpful to them. We protect privacy and trust. We aren't sharing their stories unless we're sharing it to, Megan or somebody who can be helpful because it goes outside of your scope or you're concerned for their well-being and safety. Know what your limits are. Again, if you're there, and we have people who come to our events and their whole job is just to sign people in because they're like data people and they're number people. They're not the people that are comfortable having these conversations. So again, just make sure that you get them over to who can. Also, part of knowing your limits is, even if the other hat that you wear is, I'm a realtor, I'm a doctor, I am a counselor. In this role, that's not what you are. You're not there to sell somebody a house. You're not there to offer them advice, for a cut on their leg, or and those invisible, mental health, emotional wounds. So don't offer those levels of advice. Just stick with we're here to have conversation in your grief, and then allow them to, WebMD, Dr. Google their symptoms, or, hey, you should call your doctor, or walk them over to the veterans or the village, the resource village, so that they can get some advice and some stuff from the experts over there. Establishing healthy expectations. Again, for our mentors, it's just making sure that people are taking care of themselves and not being in a capacity where they're needed 24/7 from somebody. For you guys, healthy expectations is, I'm not, and I assume Megan is not either, asking you to form lifelong friendships and relationships with these folks. You're there in this, moment that they need you, but that's why there's other resources available for the long term for them. And then commit to growth and learning. For you guys, that's just, when I send you this book, please find some time to sit down, even if it's just to do a light skim of it. Even if you just open it up and find all the pages that have lined stuff and go, oh, I'll answer some of those questions. And then make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, maybe. Yes. There we go. And my dog's going to jump in the screen. All right.
Your dog's name, Katie.
I'm here for questions or any follow-up to that you want to provide, Megan. Sorry.
Well, thank you. No, you're fine. Thank you. That was very informative, and I think, again, very helpful just for folks that maybe haven't had experience with grief before in this way. Just so that way, again, we all kind of feel prepared as we go into the event. We'll definitely print off some copies of the book too and have them as a resource kind of in the volunteer HQ. So if you have a spare moment and you want to look through it or need a reminder of something, they'll be available as a resource the day of. So I will open the floor. If anyone does have questions, there is a chat box up above, so feel free to put the questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them as well.
And it may have been more information than people needed. So some of you may be feeling a little overwhelmed, but I lean on the side of more is better, and you can decide what you do and don't need.
Yeah, I think the best advice again is to be sincere, like you said, to really treat people with that respect and give them the space to kind of share what they need to share. And then if you feel like it gets to a place where it's beyond your skill set, definitely going to that information table and finding someone that feels more comfortable with that conversation. As Katie said, we're hoping to have some peer-to-peer counselors from TAPS. They'll also be, and I'm forgetting the group's exact name, but there'll also be a van stationed here, I believe, from one of the veterans groups too, with peer counselors that will be on site there. So there'll be multiple organizations that have this resource available. So please feel free again to take advantage of that or to bring them over to someone. And as we explained before too, there will be a veterans village. So there are other resources too for veterans, whether that be medical resources from the VA, interest groups and things like that that they can join in on. So lots of opportunity to kind of just build community and network, which I think will be really wonderful and just bringing people together.
Awesome. Yeah, and our peer mentors that are coming, my hope, a lot of them, if they've been to a TAPS event before, they have these bright red TAP shirts. So we've asked them to wear those if they have one. And so the other great thing is that if you see somebody who looks like maybe they need someone to come put an arm around them or have a conversation with them and you're not in a space to do it, you don't even have to go to them. Just find, if you've seen somebody wearing a red TAP shirt and they're not doing anything, just grab them and say, hey, there's this gentleman sitting over in the corner. And they know exactly how to approach that situation and walk over and start that conversation. So sometimes it's nice just knowing that I don't even need to have that conversation. I can just grab the person. But ultimately, like, I think my best advice to you guys is just don't overthink it. Like, trust yourself, and just sit in that space with them. Everybody's a little different, but for me, when I was going through my grief, everybody wanted to, how are you doing? I'm sorry for your loss. And I really just, I was more comfortable, like, just knowing you're there. And if I want to say something too, I will. But otherwise, like, just having somebody present with me while I cried was helpful. But I didn't need to feel like I had to find the right words to answer your questions when, crying is taking up all of my capacity as it is. So.
Great advice. And again, following up from this webinar, you'll get a video link to it. So that way, if you want to rewatch it, or if there's additional things that you're kind of looking for, you can always go back. You'll get the slide deck as well. So you'll have that as a resource and that training booklet. And then from Mount Calvary, you'll just get a volunteer handbook that has more information about the event itself. And then if you do have questions coming up, feel free to shoot me an email and I can definitely forward them along to Katie to get them answered. So thank you everyone for your time tonight. We're very appreciative of it. And we look forward to meeting you all in a few weeks.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, everyone.